A sign of success for me is like when someone says, "Oh, that's a good question." I always say, copy the questions, not the answers, because it's like asking those questions again might lead them on a similar path, or it may lead them on a different path because their
Yeah,
circumstances are different. The
yeah,
reality is, you could get 10x, I think, but there is a mountain of practices and things to learn, and you can't really skip steps either.
Welcome to the Tech Waka podcast, where we dive into the journeys of New Zealand's top tech leaders. Your host for today is Jakub, bringing you conversations with tech leaders and innovators from across Aotearoa. Join us as we uncover the experiences, challenges, and successes that shape our tech community. This episode of the Tech Waka podcast is proudly brought to you by Wires Uncrossed, lifting the standard of software delivery across New Zealand, Australia, and beyond. A big thanks to Wires Uncrossed for supporting the Tech Waka mission and backing the voices of our tech leadership community. To learn more, go to wiresuncrossed.co.nz.
most CTOs I talk to are technically brilliant and quietly struggling. Not with the architecture decisions or the cloud migrations, but with the stuff nobody prepares them for. Stuff like communication, decision-making under pressure, and the loneliness of the role. My guest today, Daniel Walters, spent years as a CTO himself, including at Seek Asia, and now he coaches and consults with CTOs across New Zealand. In this conversation, we get into why coaching produces commitment, where mentoring only produces compliance, what the real patterns are underneath the problems CTOs bring to him, and how he and a small team built an AI-assisted engineering course. If you lead engineers, or you are one of them, stay with us. There's going to be a lot of wisdom for you in this episode. Hey Daniel, how are you?
Doing well, Jakub. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. People in the community, they may know you mostly as a founder and host of the Great CTO podcast and the newsletter that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have been a CTO of scaled businesses, including Seek Asia, and now you spend most of your time coaching and consulting with CTOs. And I'm curious about that moment when you moved from being the operator to becoming a coach and consultant. What was that like?
That was quite a change, but a necessary one. So I moved to New Zealand in 2020. COVID had happened. It was happening. And we'd
Remember
already
that?
planned to move from Malaysia to New Zealand. So it definitely slowed things down and got established, bought a house, did some contracting work with Xero, and then spent a year as a CPTO with Weirdly. But after probably 2 years in, I started to notice the impact of COVID and all the disruption on the family, and particularly my son and his schooling and things like that. When I was thinking about what's the next opportunity, flexibility was really important, and being present and available and on hand for supporting my son and his schooling and what was essentially reintegrating into school and the transition from kindergarten. So all of those things. Oh, my wife returned to the workforce and wanted to make sure that she was given the best possible chance to do that successfully as well. I'd met Gareth from Hyper when I first landed in New Zealand, and it just really enjoyed chatting with him. And so I reached back out to Gareth and I said, "Tell me more about this consulting stuff you do at Hyper." And it started from there. Yeah, and then the coaching followed maybe a year and a half after that, maybe a year, something like that, where some of our clients were asking for coaching support. And I'd always informally operated as a coach. That was my working style as an executive, or at least one of my styles. And we started to do it more formally within the consulting context. And then later on, I was like, I really enjoy this. It's a really good balance with consulting, because consulting, the feedback cycles can be very long, and coaching, the feedback cycles through your experience mentoring, feedback cycles can be really short. And so, yeah, as a lifelong learner, like I really value the shorter feedback cycle so I
Uh-huh.
can learn faster. And yeah, this is the perfect fit of consulting and coaching.
And how do you define the difference between consulting, coaching, and mentoring?
Yeah,
How do you define that?
and there's fractional executive work as well, and there's
Yeah.
advisory work, and I cover all of those within my Great CTO business. So consulting, generally you've got clients that have a particular problem or a need and a feeling that they could benefit from some external expertise. And that can be for different reasons. Sometimes they might have the internal expertise, but they want a second opinion. Sometimes they lack the expertise internally and don't want to invest in that internally. They'd rather buy it from the market. But it tends to be longer term engagements, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. Whereas the coaching and mentoring, that's normally individual driven. Occasionally it might be group based coaching and things like that, but the majority is individual based. And with coaching and mentoring, normally there is an individual, they might be looking to expand what they can do, or they may feel like there's a deficiency or a gap that they want to address. Sometimes the person to be coached will come and reach out to me, and sometimes someone will reach out on their behalf. Maybe if it's a CTO, maybe the CEO might reach out on their behalf and say, hey, I'm looking for a coach for my CTO. Or maybe it's the head of HR or chief people officer reach out. In terms of the differences between coaching and mentoring, the way I think about it, and look, there's people with more formal education in coaching and mentoring, but the way I think about it is coaching, I find it more Socratic. It's based on the questions that you ask. Now, you still might have the relevant career experience, as I have in the CTO, CIO, CPTO space. The temptation would be to just tell someone, all right, you could do this and you could do that. But as a coach, it's using that discipline of really knowing what questions to ask and having the asking of those questions help illuminate maybe it's an assumption or something else that might be holding someone back, and helping people to identify their own options. And that can be, I find it really powerful because when people are working off their own steam or using their own ideas, then they tend to follow through on them more strongly. But it is good to have a safety valve. So even though I offer coaching, it would be very frustrating for them if I am only asking the questions. What can actually happen is they might feel like, hey, I'm out of options. I can't think of anything else to come up with. And so I always say, look, if you're out of options, just ask me. So at any point during the coaching session, if you feel like, hey, you want advice, you want that sort of mentorship perspective, you can ask, and that's a safety valve. So yeah, that's how I think about those different activities.
Yeah, and I think that's the important distinction between mentoring and coaching, where coaching is about holding that space and giving people a chance to think through the problems. Because I myself quite often find that I'm just so close to the problem or to the domain or to the issue that it's so hard to take that step back. And you just need someone external who doesn't have that pressure or that tension, and they can just ask this. Sometimes it's one or two questions that just wake you up. And, oh, why haven't I thought about this? Or, yeah, I should have looked at those options. And that just unblocks the thinking or kind of get you out of the rut of what you're doing. And Daniel, how do you find the CTOs that you coach? How do they approach coaching? Because some of them, I'm guessing, may had some coaching before, some of them may be new to coaching. How do you think that first reaction is?
A lot of them are new to coaching, really, and haven't had that sort of support before. And in particular, if someone's reached out on their behalf, they are quite worried or concerned about what it actually is. So I am addressing that early on. I've got even a blog post I've written about it, which is covering the common concerns. And everyone goes through that same sort of discovery steps. So first of all, like they're often worried about, am I going to be judged? So am I going to come here and I'm going to share
Yeah.
something which is not quite perfect? And then is Daniel going to judge me? And no, I often start sharing from a point of humiliation of all the things that have gone wrong before they went right within my career, and helping them realize that this is a judgment-free scenario. We're always learning. I'm still learning. Anyone who's been successful is still learning. And that is a key part of building up some trust. It's also, they're worried about you coming with your ideas and pushing an agenda about basically you're going to be there to tell them what to do. And obviously, as we've just been discussing about how coaching actually works, it's not really about telling them do X or do Y. It's asking questions and then, as you say, giving them the space and putting it back to them on like, okay, well, based on what we've been talking about, what options might you have? And so once they realize that's the format, it's far more disarming in terms of, oh, okay, I see how this works. They still might have skepticism, as in, how could questions possibly lead me to something new? Even my discovery call is a coaching session. It's a coaching session with 5 minutes of information at the start and 5 minutes of information at the end, and everything else is coaching. And so they get used to the format and normally have some minor epiphanies or minor, oh, hang on a second. A sign of success for me is like when someone says, oh, that's a good question. And
Yes.
you always know that you've asked something in a way that's, had them think about something a little bit differently. So it's always quite a rewarding aspect when you hear that sort of response.
Let's talk for a moment about the structure of your coaching, because some people might be curious. How does it look like? How do you start? If someone wanted to reach out to you, what can they expect when it comes to frequency of sessions or the duration of sessions? Can you tell us a bit more about the structure?
The basic logistic, I'm in a discovery call. I've got a booking link. So people, when they hear about me, they normally get the booking link as well. They'll see the available times. The first discovery call is a free discussion, no commitments one way or the other. And it's a very simple format. So tends to be just hour-long sessions. People can pick between, are we going to meet weekly or fortnightly? Some have gone for monthly, but it's normally one of those three options. Fortnightly is probably where the majority is, and then there's probably another 30% on the weekly and monthly option. And then we start with the positive. What's going well for you? What do you want to keep happening? What are the things that you've done that you're really proud of? What else positive is happening elsewhere in the organization? What's working? And exploring that. It's insightful not just because of what it is, but what they think is successful, or what is positive from their perspective. Then I tend to ask them to have pre-thought of an issue or two of things they want to work through, and have the bulk of the session on one or two topics, really. And then we save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to think about commitments. Out of all the things that we might have talked about over the session, what's one or two things that you would put in practice? Now, we might have identified 10 things, 10 potential things, but you really, you don't need to try and overcommit. One or two things is more than enough, particularly if it's about seeing it through. And there's something powerful about also making the commitment to someone else. There's another strength in coaching that you're going to see Daniel again in 2 weeks. But what will I have?
As he's going to ask that question, how has it been? How have you done your actions? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And it's different people have different motivators, right? So for some people, that extrinsic sort of motivation about it's what you're doing for others is a strong motivator. Some people it's more intrinsically based, but having that at least as an option. Some people like to come up with the option in the session. Some people like to mull it over and email me the next day. All of these can can work depending on what people's preferences are.
And have you ever had a situation when you were asking questions, someone was giving you some of the answers, and you clearly felt that, oh, there's a better way to approach it, or you just feel that you have the answer because you've been in exactly that situation? Have you ever had that, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's part of the discipline. Like you might have the better way, but it may not be the better way for that person. And
Mm-hmm.
you may see it as a better way because when you're in that situation, you had other things that were also in place that this person doesn't have in place. So you can't, as similar as the situations might seem, there's always differences. And so you need to go with the thing that's right for the person. And it doesn't help to like rush all the way through to the end of the story. You know what I mean? If they need to grow to get to that choice, and then they've got to go through they've got to go through those growth steps. And I see that happen so often, like particularly through consulting. There's a lot of people who they're process experts, or they might be ways of working experts, and so they've seen what better might look like, but it's things that worked in organizations that had gone through so much evolution. And it's just, you can't just copy paste what it looks like at the end of that journey and say, hey, that worked for us. You start this in your situation, because you're missing all the deltas all the way between and out. And yeah, I always say, copy the questions, not the answers, because it's like asking those questions again might lead them on a similar path, or it may lead them on a different path because their circumstances are different.
I like to think that for asking those questions and giving that space, you get the commitment, versus if you give someone an answer, you often get compliance because they will just do what you told them to do.
Yeah.
And the compliance can get you only maybe the couple of first steps, but it's not the full commitment to actually see something through, or take that action or ownership of those actions. Because if I do something and it didn't work out, it's going to be Daniel's fault because he told me to do it. It's not my fault. It was not my decision, really. But
100%.
if it was my thinking, I can learn from that.
I've seen this play out, and I mentored some startups back when I was in Malaysia, and the first few I mentored, I mean, I found it was both how I put things across, but it was also there's different personality types. And so I was mentoring about 4 or 5 startups at once, and they were quite strong-minded, and they would take advice and just bring it into the mix and make their own choices. And some were just like ready to comply because that's how it had been at school or something like that. And so if you said, hey, did you think about this? Did you put logging in here, or did you, then you'll come back next week, or some of them I was coaching even daily the next day, and they'll have gone, this off the cuff comment that you'd made had translated into like days of development time. And even when all the evidence was telling them that it was not the right thing to do, because they were complying, they were busy to it. And as you say, not the ownership. They're like, what? Yeah, why did you tell us to do this? We did this for 3 days and it's a waste of time. It was one comment out of about 50. But yeah, those learning experiences, I think, help shape the coaching approach where, I am far more Socratic and careful about how I approach things. So, yeah, it was good building blocks for the coaching career.
I'm sure the listeners are now very curious about some of the topics, themes, or patterns you've been seeing in your conversation lately with CTOs across New Zealand. What have been some of those topics that you come see again and again?
Funnily enough, and I've coached some people who have been in executive roles for quite a number of years, and also coach people who are newer to executive roles. Yeah. Funnily enough, the themes are still pretty similar. So for a lot of them, it starts with foundational pieces, which are what we presume are the basics, which are like time management. Now, you might be a great time manager and then you become an executive, and then you realize that you've got to learn a whole new set of time management skills just because of the amount of things vying for your attention as an executive. And particularly for technology executives because technology has infiltrated into every aspect of the business. And I think that is actually a driver why it used to be adequate that there were general leadership coaches, and now there is a well-established niche of technology coaches, CTO coaches. And I guess what we're seeing in the industry is a lot of us go through technology career track and we are not well equipped with all the skill sets that we might need within an executive role. The other foundational elements is around communication. As engineers, we've grown up and gone through the ranks as engineers. We learn how to think deductively, and then as a natural follow-on, we communicate deductively. And that is actually quite a painful way for people to receive information. And so there often is a disconnect. Also, because it's deductive, it tends to be very much on the how, which means you're focusing on the elements that are the least relevant to the person you're often trying to communicate to. So focusing on inductive communication and simple ways to do that. Other themes, things like feedback, how to give and receive feedback. All of these seem like quite general fundamentals, but I think that it helps that it is coming from someone that has been on that same journey. I arrived at the exact same situation that they were in from a pressure in the job role point of view, and and then failed a lot before I succeeded and had to work my way through it. And so I think it helps to hear from someone who's like, oh yeah, I recognize how that feels and how that is, and then can ask them the questions that might lead them to resources and other things that might help them.
So it sounds more like this question more about leadership more than technical question. How you lead yourself, how you lead your peers, influence your peers, how you lead your reports or your teams, more than how do you build this scalable architecture in the cloud? How do you choose this cloud provider versus that cloud provider?
It is, but let's say for one of those decisions, because as we get past the fundamentals, it does really get into that sort of decision science aspect. You do need to be able to think clearly and separate out concepts. Often find people everything feels like it's all connected, and it is. Everything is in a way connected, but not quite as enmeshed as it might be. And so you often have, hey, this is connected and that is connected, and they're struggling to articulate what might be in their mind. They're struggling to help people see what they see. And so there's a whole bunch of ways that you could break down different ideas to their discrete components and communicate about them and frame decisions and things like that. And once you get past the fundamentals, it's probably the most interesting part is getting into the actual decision making, and then all the things that can support decision making, not just how to communicate, but how do you communicate from one to many? What are the right things to communicate? How do we help everyone see what the context was that we made the decision within? And then how can they anticipate what the consequences of that decision might be and how they get involved? Yeah, it does link back to those technical decisions, but yeah, you do need some clarity of how they connect to everything.
And how often does AI come up in the conversations?
In the coaching conversations, not so much, except as a problem. So one sort of general problem that we saw was I'd be talking through with CTOs. So what's one of the challenges that you're facing? And they would say, oh, I'm really excited by what I'm seeing with AI and all the potential. But the challenge is my next most senior technologist in my team is completely disinterested. They think it's not very capable. Their problem isn't how fast they can type. And they're like, how do I approach this? I'm on one end of the spectrum, and the person that I'm looking to help me with this is on the other end of the spectrum. So That's the main way. Thankfully, the rest of the time, then normally we're talking through other types of challenges. So the rest of the coaching tends to be much more about human factors.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great example because I did see that quite often happening, that you have those very experienced engineers, staff engineers, or tech leads who are skeptical about
Mhm.
agentic development, and you actually want them to lead the teams, and you want them to set the example
Mhm.
to other engineers. How do you, in your consulting world or in your advisory or fractional CTO roles, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. On the advisory front, I've had a fair number of companies reach out and say, hey, we saw you writing about AI assisted engineering. We have this question, which is, should we be growing our team by adding more people? Or should we be investing in these AI assisted engineering tools or a mixture of both? And so that's from the advisory point of view. From the other side, the sort of consulting side, we saw these frustrated CTOs of, hey, I'm feeling really bullish about this. We've got what feels like a lot of resistance in the team. What do we do with that? And so with a few other colleagues, we'd this is going back 2 years ago, we'd navigated a similar sort of thing within the consultancy we're working in, of just like we could see that everyone was on a different point in the spectrum about what they thought about AI. And even myself and one of my colleagues, Don Smith, we were both like interested, but also uncomfortable about it. We knew about the large energy draw and what was used in the training data and all of these issues that we either felt uncomfortable about or at least just didn't know where we stood on those things or how we wanted to navigate those. And so what we realized is for ourselves, we needed some time and space to actually navigate that. For us, it was working together, sharing what we were learning, vice versa. And we were like, this is working really well for the two of us. Maybe if we could create this situation for others, they might find it valuable too. And that's so we didn't set out to create a AI assisted engineering course, but it just happened to be the right form factor, the right shape for solving this for others. And it was like, what's the simplest way we can make this work? Let's set up a Discord, advertise it, put together a curriculum and share it with others. And so, yeah, we're up to our 8th cohort, and it's good for us because we keep learning. We keep seeing these tools used in more and more contexts. But we also can share everything that we've learned in a way that is deliberate and experiential and creates opportunities that are safe, because people expect 10x, right? And so when you're given a new set of tools and leadership says, I read this article that tells me that with these tools, you'll be 10x engineers, puts a lot of performance pressure. And the reality is you could get 10x, I think, but there is a mountain of practices and things to learn, and you can't really skip steps either. Yeah, creating a safe space, a community where people can share and learn in is been rewarding for us and been helping others commence their journey without quite the high stakes that they were previously feeling.
Yeah, I find that really crucial to have that environment without that pressure. That's why one of my main things I try to bring to companies or even to our TechWaka community is the practice of katas, either architecture katas or code katas, when you have that chance to solve a problem without that pressure, or it's not a work problem. You just come with people just for the sake of learning and exploring. And sometimes you would do the same kata again and again. You pair up with different person, you find different way to solve the same problem. And the beauty is that you don't have that pressure of, oh, you need to deliver something by the end of today or have another commit. Actually, in a proper kata, you delete your code at the end of it because the code is not the point. The point is the learning that you make. So it's really great to have that opportunity to learn in a safe environment all of these new techniques, which require very different thinking, different way of approaching problems and defining problems, and you're working on a different level of abstraction, which requires learning and rewiring your brain. So I think it's great to have that opportunity for learning together with other people in a safe space.
We say things like expect to rework your workflow and expect for there to be emotions and feelings, and expect there to be times when you anthropomorphize the agent, but then go and see it for what it is. You may have times when you think about the agent and go, oh, it's superhuman, it's very smart. But then also, hey, it's smart in certain dimensions, but very dumb in other dimensions. And actually, all of the silly things it does is often the places where there's a grounding for a practice of how can I still get something that is a bit more predictable and reliable and matches my intent with these tools. So that being able to hear that as you're learning, I feel is reassuring and helps with the learning process, because you might be struggling, but at least you're not going, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I must be doing something wrong. I'm not 10x yet.
If someone was listening to this and they were wondering where they can find you and talk about coaching, or where they can find about the training that you're delivering, where can they find you?
So for coaching and advisory related things, they can come to my website, greatcto.me. That's greatcto.me. For the AI assisted engineering course, which is a 9-week course, we will put the link. It's quite a long link. So we'll put that in the show notes, or you can look for it there. Yeah.
That was really great to have that conversation, Daniel. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a while, and seeing you so active in the community and creating so much content and the space for the tech leaders in New Zealand. I certainly was inspired by you to start up TechWaka. I guess on behalf of the leaders in the New Zealand community, thank you, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much. And likewise, Jakob, we enjoyed chatting with you on the CTO Lifeline, and you've provided so much to the New Zealand tech community as well. I really admire all the stuff that you've done under TechWaka. Yeah, absolute pleasure to catch up with you and to have a chat. Always enjoy it.
Thank you. Daniel has been on my radar for a while. He's one of the people quietly doing important work for the technology leadership community here in New Zealand. And I am glad we finally got to record this together. If you are a CTO wondering whether coaching is for you, I hope this gave you a clear picture of what it actually is and what it is not. And if you are an engineer navigating the AI transition and feeling the pressure to already be 10x, I think that Daniel's course might be worth a look. Link is in the show notes, and you can find Daniel at greatcto.me. Thanks for listening.
A special thanks to our sponsor, Wires Uncrossed, helping teams across New Zealand, Australia and beyond untangle software delivery and build systems that truly perform. We're grateful for their support in making this conversation possible. Check them out at wiresuncrossed.co.nz.